What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So not only do we have the draft in 2 days, we got free agency in 5 days. We've already seen big deals go down this summer, like the Jacob Markstrom trade and Linus Ullmark trade. So it is time to fully start talking offseason. And if the Stanley Cup final ended earlier, I probably would have done a preview every single division going into each team's. But I'm just making a big Eastern Conference today and then Western Conference either tomorrow or a couple days from now. We're going to go through every single team in the Eastern Conference, go over how much salary cap space they have, key free agents, what free agents could they be targeting in either free agency or trades. So let's dive into it, because considering teams are actually getting some salary cap this summer, the salary cap is finally jumping from $83.5 million to like 88. Teams are going to be far more aggressive. I think we're going to see a lot more instead of just talk like in the 2022-2023 season of things happening. There's going to be some pretty aggressive moves, and we've already seen some. So without further ado, let's get into it. First, we're going to start off with the reigning Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers. They have around $20 million in cap space, but they do have two massive unrestricted free agents in Sam Reinhart and Brandon Montour, as well as some other guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Tarasenko. I think Luce Rainen's a restricted free agent. So when looking at it, I think that they're going to attempt to obviously try to re-sign Reinhart and Montour. I think Montour is going to get re-signed. I think Sam Reinhart might be the more so the odd man out in terms of pricing himself out of what Bill Zito wants to give him. And rightfully so. He should cash the fuck in, considering he had 57 goals this season, the game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup Final Game 7. So if you put a gun to my head, I think I would say that they're both going to resign, but I wouldn't be shocked if Sam Reinhart ends up hitting the open market and instead the Panthers decide to re-sign Tarasenko at a really low rate, as well as maybe pick up some depth pieces, keep their depth in place that we have seen, especially considering, my mic's a little bit off, especially considering the fact that, I just completely lost my train of thought, especially considering the fact that Carter Verhaeghe and Sam Bennett are both going to need extensions or extension eligible on July 1st this year. Bill Zito might decide, I'm not going to pay this guy north of $9 million if that's what he's asking for. That's probably what he would get on the open market. Instead, I'm going to save some money now, keep some of my depth pieces, and then be able to re-sign those guys. We have our two superstar forwards. We don't need to be paying another guy over $8.59 million. So that's my overall blueprint for the Florida Panthers. Anthony Stolarz has priced himself out. Hopefully Spencer Knight's ready to go to be the backup for the Florida Panthers. Next up, the Toronto Maple Leafs. When looking at Toronto Maple Leafs, well, the most important domino is going to be Mitch Marner. Personally, right now, I think it is like a 50-50, but let's go under the assumption that Mitch Marner does not get traded. If he gets traded, I think the ideal package is some type of legit top 4 puck-moving defenseman and a solid youngish middle 6 forward that can play and eventually turn into a solid 60-ish point guy. I think that would be ideal. I'm not looking for future picks and future prospects if I'm the Toronto Maple Leafs, but right now they have around $18 million in cap space. They do have a decent amount of defensemen that are pending UFAs, as well as Tyler Bertuzzi, as well as Max Domi. But I think when looking at Toronto Maple Leafs, they need to bring in, if they end up keeping Mitch Marner, they still need to bring in some type of top 4 defenseman, a puck-moving top 4 defenseman. When looking at their defense core this year, it was pretty pitiful. They could not get the puck out of their own zone and actually create offense from their blue line. So I think that's going to be massive for them. And then in terms of in net, I think the Joseph Woll deal could actually be pretty solid that they're apparently going to give him. But you definitely need to get an established backup for Joseph Woll, considering how injury prone this guy has been with the Toronto Maple Leafs and even in the AHL. He's not played a full season in God knows when. So I think bringing in, similarly talking about Anthony Stolarz before, a Stolarz, Brossoit from Winnipeg, getting a guy that, if need be, if Joseph Woll goes down, can actually be a starter and actually hold some load. But I think that he's a good player. I think those are some good goalie options in order to actually have a guy that is reliable, at least in a 1B role going forward. Blue Jackets. Blue Jackets have one of the biggest trade pieces on the market right now in Patrick Laine. I don't think that they're going to get a haul for Patrick Laine unless they legitimately retain 30-40% of him, considering he's making $8.7 million. I would love a potential like Martin Necas swap that's been talked about a lot, considering the fact Don Waddell is the new general manager of Columbus, was the general manager in Carolina. I think that would be pretty ideal. Again, they'd have to retain some money on that. But when looking at the Blue Jackets, besides that, they got $21 million to spend. And again, that goes up to almost $30 million if they move Laine, with only Marchenko and Sillinger as their legit free agents. It's a really interesting situation because I think they should address the defense, but if you sign another guy to a pretty long-term deal like a Damon Severson last year, like a Provorov, when the hell is David Jiricek and Denton Matechuk going to play on this goddamn team? You need to carve out a role for those guys. So I think I would probably sign more so address the forward core goals for. They were like 5th to last in the entire NHL in goals for last year. You hope that Jiricek and Matachuk can play at the NHL. Jiricek should be at the NHL level next year full time, but if not, maybe bring in a more veteran guy on like a 2 to 3 year deal. And in net, similarly to the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think they should be looking at some of the top goaltenders in the market. I'm not sure you can trust Elvis Merzlikins given how much he has regressed in the last 3 years or so. On top of the fact, Tarasov, he's an okay guy. He's 25 years old. Maybe he takes another step, but I would look at maybe a Cam Talbot to solidify and actually provide some stability to their goaltending situation. But it should be a pretty aggressive offseason for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Although I don't think they're going to be a playoff team next year, they should take a positive step next season and actually be around the mid to high 70s. I think would be a success for them heading into next season. Next up, the New York Islanders. When looking at my New York Islanders, they have around $5 million in cap space this summer. You look at it, guys like Anders Lee, the captain, 2 years left at $7 million. JGP, 2 years left at $5 million. Serious buyout options or trade dumps when looking at it. I'm not too encouraged after what I saw the Detroit Red Wings have to pay just to get rid of Jake Wallman at only 2 years, 3.4. But I think you got to find a way to free up some money. They have $5 million. They do have some UFAs and RFAs. Simon Holmes from RFA. Kyle Clutterbuck, Matt Martin. Honestly, I think that they should probably walk. I don't think that we should bring them back unless it's under $1.5 million, as well as Mike Riley. But I think that if he's asking for serious term and serious money above $2.5 million, you let him walk as well. But if you free up that money, you go after a legit top 6 forward with this team. This team is lacking offensive creation outside of like Bo Horvat, Barzell, and Brock Nelson. You go after a Nikolai Ehlers. I think that is the perfect fit to really add some skill and speed to this team. I wouldn't be opposed to a Patrick Laine at $1.7 million retained just because he is such a fantastic goal scorer when he is healthy. But something needs to happen this offseason. After losing back-to-back years to the Carolina Hurricanes, last year in 6 games, this year in 5 games, clearly you're not going through some type of rebuild. You have arguably the worst prospect pool in the entire NHL, and you do have a decent amount of picks this year. You got a first, the 20th overall, and 2 other seconds. But I think you definitely need to go out and make a splash, considering the fact that this core is this core for the next 3 to 5 years. Do something. Detroit Red Wings really kicked things off yesterday in terms of their offseason. When looking at it, they have $32 million after the Jake Wallman trade. I don't like the Jake Wallman trade. I think they paid too much to dump that contract. But when looking at it, $32 million this offseason, you can kind of pencil in 15 to 16 million of that is going to go to I almost just said Raymond Sider, Lucas Raymond and Moritz Sider, but they also have a lot of unrestricted free agents. I think they're going to try to bring back Shane Gothisberger. It's probably going to cost around $4.55 million. Daniel Sprong is going to be a lot more expensive after only making $2 million last year. Patrick Kane's due for a massive raise. David Perron's an unrestricted free agent, but I don't really see them bringing him back. So in looking at it, I think they are preparing to either bring back Kane or go after a Steven Stamkos or even a Jake Gensel or a Sam Reinhart if he hits the open market. I think that that's definitely an interesting play if it's a Steven Stamkos or Patrick Laine, guys that are getting up there in age that aren't going to be there for the long term, the full fruition of the Yzer plan, but maybe he thinks they're ready to win next season. I would address the defense core probably more, especially after getting rid of Jake Wallman. When looking at it, Sider, Ghost, if they re-sign Ghost, Justin Holl, Chirot, Olimata, and Edvinsson is the projected 6th defenseman right now, and Jeff Petrie as well, I believe, is still on the team, I don't know if he's an unrestricted free agent, but when looking at it, yeah, this defense core is not that impressive, especially when considering Lyon and Husso is your tandem. So I would probably go after a defenseman, but I think they are probably going to go down the route of trying to get a star forward. If they land a Jake Gensel or Sam Reinhart, more power to them. I think the Wallman deal will be pretty solid, but if it is for one of these older guys that easily could fall off as soon as next year, I'm not too big of a fan, but it's definitely going to be an interesting offseason for the Detroit Red Wings. Next up, Buffalo Sabres. They have around $30 million to spend after the Jeff Skinner buyout. They saved $7.5 million on that buyout. They got some unrestricted free agents, UPL, Paterka, Gergensons, and unrestricted free agents. So let's say around, after they re-sign everybody that they have to re-sign, $13 to $15 million. I think for this Buffalo Sabres team, a right shot defenseman is massive, especially more of a defensive guy. If Chris Tanev hits the open market, they should be all over him. Even a Brett Pesce or Matt Roy could be very solid options for this Buffalo Sabres team. I think you bet on Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, Cousins, all having bounce back years offensively with that forward core, but the defense core is just not nearly good enough. You're going to run back the UPL and Levi tandem, so bring in quality top 4 right shot defensemen, and I think this team could be competitive at a pretty high level this year. As considering they're buying out Jeff Skinner, going to have to deal with all that cap hit down the line, they're clearly going to be ultra aggressive this offseason. It scares me a little bit because last offseason, their big moves were Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson, which have not really worked out that much. But I think Buffalo and Kevin Adams, he knows that his job is probably on the line if he doesn't make the playoffs this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. New Jersey Devils, not too much to talk about really, considering they got Markstrom. Apparently, they're in the running. One of the members of the Empty Netters podcast, Dan Powers, said that Pesci to New Jersey is looking like almost a done thing. And obviously, you can't officially sign it till July 1st, but there's a lot of smoke behind that. So if they do those two moves, that's kind of it for their offseason. They don't have a ton of salary cap space, especially considering Pesci's going to get like $4.55 million. But that'd be a solid offseason for them. I don't love the Pesci move, considering they have so many young defensemen up and coming, but I understand addressing getting that top 4 puck-moving defenseman. And Markstrom is a very good trade for them. They seem set to go. It's a pretty solid offseason if those are the two things, on top of drafting a very good guy at 10th overall. Next up, Pittsburgh Penguins. They kind of made their own bed when looking at it. They don't have a lot of flexibility, considering they gave Malkin that 4-year deal. What was it, 2 offseasons ago? Letang got a 6-year deal. They go all in with the Erik Karlsson trade. They have $11.6 million in cap space. Their goalies are set. They re-signed Nedeljkovic. Riley Smith is maybe the one guy that I would look at to potentially get traded. He's making $5 million next season. I think he had like 40 points this year, not that very good of underlying numbers. So in looking at it, I would maybe bring in some type of top 4 defenseman, second pair defenseman, guys that I've mentioned before, on top of bringing in a middle 6 winger, considering a guy like Raquel really fell off this season. Besides that, they really can't make any impact moves until they for sure move a Riley Smith. And if we saw what Jake Wallman cost to just dump, I don't know if you're going to go down that route, $5 million. I think he's about the same level of player as Jake Wallman. So it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Next up, Tampa Bay Lightning, $5.3 million in salary cap space right now. So they don't have Steven Stamkos money in order to re-sign him. So you got to look at what can they potentially do to open up that money. Connor Sheary has 2 years left at $2 million. Tanner Jeannot has 1 year left at $2.6 million. You can maybe attach a 3rd round pick, 4th round pick. They don't have a ton of picks. That's another problem. But you maybe attach a pick to get rid of one of those guys. Anthony Cirelli is maybe a potential option. He doesn't have a no movement or no trade cost. I think it kicks in maybe next year. He has a couple more years left at like $6.25 million. Somebody will take him and probably give up assets considering how good of a defensive player he is. But are you going to trade a guy that's going to be on your team for the next decade to Steven Stamkos, who's obviously on the decline, still a very good player, but on the decline, 34 years old? I think that you just find a way to dump Sheary and Jeannot and somehow give Steven Stamkos a 5-year deal at $6.75 million. You get the cap hit low for the next year or two, and then down the line, you're going to be rebuilding in 4 to 5 years regardless, so who gives a shit? Make him a Bolt for life. I think you got to do that. Flyers. When looking at the Flyers, $7 million in cap space once they move Ryan Ellis over to LTIR, but they have some options to potentially open up some money. Johansson has 1 year left at $4 million. Cal Peterson, 1 year left at $5 million. Atkinson, 1 year left at 5.8. So if you move some of those guys, buy out some of those guys, they're going to have some more flexibility. Next offseason, a lot of their guys come off the books and some of their bad contracts. They're going to have a shit ton of money there. So when looking at it, I would maybe bring in a middle 6 forward to kind of beef up the scoring. The goaltending tandem is kind of set in stone with Urson and Fedotov. I don't really love that much, but when looking at them, I can't really see them getting too aggressive. A Martin Necas or Line A deal could make some sense for both of them in order to boost their forward core, but I'm not sure they're going to trade a ton of high-end picks in order to get that done. So when looking at it, I'm not really expecting that much from the Philadelphia Flyers. I think their big acquisition was Matvei Michkov coming over, and I think next offseason they're going to reassess things based on how they did last year. Do they build off it and actually make the playoffs? It's going to be very interesting to see how the Philadelphia Flyers go about it this offseason and into the season. Next up, the Montreal Canadiens, $19 million in cap space to send. I think Martin Necas is a fantastic piece for the Montreal Canadiens to go out and get. He's only, 24, 25 years old, 70 points last year. Shouldn't really cost that much. They do have a late first-round pick from the Winnipeg Jets from the Sean Monahan trade. That's how I switched up Calgary. But when looking at it, I think they could potentially work something out. In terms of a Martin Necas deal, I would like a lot. I don't think that they're going to sign any mega deals, considering they are still on the ascent. I mean, I don't really see a point of bringing back even like a Jonathan Marchessault, who's 34 years old, on like a 3 to 4 year deal. I'm not sure they're at that stage yet. So definitely bring in some solid depth pieces on 2 to 3 year deals, $3 to $4 million. Nothing too big, but I think you just maybe bring in a guy via trade that fits your timeline, but I'm not sure you're going to be extremely aggressive in going after a Jake Gensel or Sam Reinhart. That seems absolutely insane. Next up, Washington Capitals, $12 million in cap space. When looking at it, I don't know what this team's real goal is. They traded for PLD. I'm not sure if that means they're more aggressive now or if they're thinking more long-term, considering PLD is younger. I don't know. $12 million. I think you got to get a second goaltender for Charlie Lindgren at this point. Maybe you go after and try to get a Tyler Toffoli to boost your scoring, or a Jake DeBrusk that's a little bit of a younger guy. Beats me what the Washington Capitals are going to do. They're going to be perfectly average next season, so I really don't care that much. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think the Washington Capitals are going to do? Next up, the Boston Bruins, off to a rough start in their offseason after the Ullmark deal. I think we can all agree that's a pretty below average deal. Not them getting a first-round pick, but them taking on Korpisalo is pretty rough. They still have $21 million to spend. You got to assume that's probably going to go to DeBrusk if they re-sign him for $4.5. Swayman, $8 million, so you're left with around $9 million. I don't like the unrestricted free agent center market that much. I don't think that they should force themselves into giving Lindholm this 8-year, $7.5 million deal that we've heard rumored a bunch of times. I don't think that he's at that much of an upgrade, if at all, over their current center situation with Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle. Not saying Zacha and Coyle are legit cup contending first-line centers, but if the right guy isn't available for trade and the right guy isn't available on the open market right now in terms of a center, I think they're better off either trading for an Ehlers, trading for a Line in terms of younger guys that can immediately impact your offense, or going out and getting a veteran like a Matt Duchene, like a Jonathan Marchessault, who won't really cost that much in that much term, but can massively impact your offensive production next year. I don't think that they should feel forced to go out and get a legit center, because a legit center really isn't out there this summer in terms of the free agency market. Ottawa Senators. The Senators got busy acquiring Linus Ullmark, addressed their number one need. They got $11.3 million in cap space right now, with their biggest free agents, or restricted free agents, being Shane Pinto and Eric Brancham. Pinto, I don't know what he's going to cost. A bridge deal would probably be like $4.5 million, just because of how good he was this season for them. Brancham shouldn't be that expensive. Chychrun, I'm not sure what that deal is going to look like, if they're going to move him for future assets, if they're going to move him for a forward, for a defenseman. But I think with the remaining money, regardless, Steve Stais should be targeting some type of right side defenseman, similarly to, what team was I talking about with this? I'm blanking. Buffalo Sabres. Similarly to the Buffalo Sabres, they should go after a right-handed defenseman. They got Sanderson and Shabbat on the left side. Go out and get a guy that is a physical defensive defenseman. Zadorov, Tanev, Brendan Dillon. Go out and get a second pair of defensive defensemen to help out Linus Ullmark. Do not leave this guy to die like you did with Korpisalo. Korpisalo also just wasn't good in his own right, but a massive factor of that was the defensive structure and defensive capabilities of the Ottawa Senators. Next up, we got the New York Rangers, and after Chris Drury somehow convinced Mike Riera to waiver claim Barclay Goodrow in his remaining 3 years at $3.6 million, they have some actual money to spend. I don't think that Trouba is probably not going to get bought out or traded, but it's definitely on the table. There is some rumors, but they have $12 million, as well as Ryan Lindgren and Braden Schneider being restricted free agents. I think they're probably going to re-sign both, but it should only cost around like $6 million. They're not that key of pieces, maybe 6.5. So they're going to have around $5.5 to $6 million in order to spend, in order to go out and get that top line right wing. That is the clear need for this team. That top line of Kreider, Zibanejad, and insert top line right wing has just not been nearly effective, especially at even Trent. Well, obviously at even Trent. At even Trent, they have not been nearly good enough, especially compared to the second line. So with that $5.5, $6 million, don't think they can go out and get like a Jake Gensel or a Sam Reinhart if they hit the open market, considering around $5.5, $6 million. If they somehow do something with Trouba, maybe it's possible. But I think far more realistically, Patrick Kane reunion could potentially happen. There's reports that they're going to be attempting to go out and sign Patrick Kane. Jonathan Marchessault, I think, would be a very good add. Conn Smythe winner, a lot of experience, 42 goals this season. Duchesne, Toffoli, just get a veteran guy on a 3-year deal, $5.56 million, even 4 years. Just commit to him. All those guys that I mentioned are around the same ages as Kreider and Zibanejad and Panarin and Trocheck. So you're just going to go until the wheels fall off for the most part with that forward core. So I think they need to be aggressive in terms of addressing that top line right wing, because the rest of the team is kind of set in stone. And if they can actually get their top 2 lines clicking, they could easily make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals and actually make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. And I hate to say it, maybe even win the Stanley Cup Finals if they have 2 very, very high-end lines. That has not been the case in recent years, but it's going to be very interesting. Carolina Hurricanes, so many free agents, only $23 million in cap space as of right now. They've already re-signed Jalen Chatfield. First up, Seth Jarvis is getting re-signed. I think we can all agree with that. I'd lock him up on an 8-year deal at $8 million. He was like an $8 million player almost this year alone. I think he was probably. He was at 67 points and fantastic defensively. Lock this guy up. Lock it up. Don't overthink this. Don't try to bridge him. And then in 3 to 4 years, you have to give him $10 million when the salary cap keeps on rising. I would do my dandiest to try to re-sign Jake Gensel. I just would. If it was between Gensel and Natchez, I'd rather trade Natchez when you consider the fact that he's a restricted free agent. You can actually get solid assets back for him versus Jake Gensel. If you trade his RFA rights, you're going to get like a 4th round pick most likely. So I personally would try to keep Jake Gensel. But I'd also try to keep Brady Shea, obviously. Fantastic this year for the Carolina Hurricanes, especially in the playoffs. Teravainen is kind of a toss-up. Again, if you get rid of Gensel but keep Natchez, you might have enough money to keep Teravainen. You're definitely letting Pesce walk, as evidence that the fact that the New Jersey Devils apparently have some type of deal already cooked up with him. Teuvo, yeah, again, 50-50. They might have to dump a Kuznetsov at $3.9 million to kind of make some of this money work in order to keep a Gensel, but it is going to be a very interesting offseason. I don't think that they're going to go after an actual goalie. I've seen that be theorized a lot. Kochetkov and Anderson only make like $5.4 million combined. I think you just point to them and say one of them is going to step up in a potential way. And when looking at it, although Anderson did shit the bed in Game 6, the Carolina Hurricanes special teams shit the bed throughout the entire series. So when looking at it, the Carolina Hurricanes have a lot to do. They are not going to be adding anybody. They're just going to be praying to hold on to as many guys as they can. It is going to be an unfortunate offseason for the Carolina Hurricanes. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these offseason previews for every single team? I'm going to do the Western Conference tomorrow. I'll be seeing you in the next one.